a little bit. We'll discuss what they're adding in the next few months, so briefly what we can share at least. So my email address is on the screen right now. I'll be checking out the chat window or the Q&A window. But if I do miss your questions today, which is a good chance based on how many people we have on here, please do feel free to email me as well. All right, so just real quickly, I'm based out here in Jacksonville, Florida. I'm the founder of Pragmatic Works. Devin, who'll be joining us later today, also runs our training department. We do training and consulting all around Power BI, anything around Azure and migrations, as well as Power Apps also. And we can build an app for you or train you how to build an app. So let's begin. So I've got a few slides here today, and we've got some really cool demos. The demos that we show you can actually find on the Microsoft website. So I just want to kind of show you, there's some really cool sample data out there. But let's talk about the why first of all. What will be covered? Why people are going to Power Apps now? Well, some of the big reasons why people are using the Power Platform is to get that single view of a customer. So we have a bank, for example, and when a customer walks in, they have a loan system over here, they have the credit card system over here, they have the core banking over here. So they've got 4 or 5 systems where the bank officer has to go and pull this data all together by themselves. So Power Apps or Power BI gives you that single view of the customer. So when they walk in, you can get an appropriate answer when they walk in. One of the cool things about some of the stuff I'll be showing you today is it also allows you to identify the VIP customers that might walk in. So you can pull their account up, and you can use artificial intelligence to determine, which is just a fancy name for machine learning or data mining or whatever, to determine is the customer a high value customer or just a normal customer walking in. So maybe they have a buying pattern or they have a propensity to buy, those kind of things. Okay. Also, with things like Flow and Power Apps, we can reduce a lot of the paperwork that you might have in your environment also. A lot of those manual paperworks are going to be things like going to be error prone and a lack of accountability. So things like Flow with approvals and Power Apps can kind of create that workflow where all those gaps where people dropped the ball before are taken care of. Again, this is one of those things that people just ask me, how can I use it in Industry X? And this is kind of some of the answers we see all the time. Again, one of the cool things is if you're a manufacturing company, you might want to escalate certain kinds of notifications to a higher degree than others. I'll be showing you an example today also to where we'll read the full text out of an email, for example, or out of a comment, and we'll route them to the appropriate person based on are they talking about staff? Are they talking about facility or whatnot? So we can do that kind of routing automatically with AI as well. Okay. So lastly, just for those that have no experience in Power Apps, Power Apps gives us the ability to create an application one time, use it across n number of platforms, whether it be a tablet, an iPhone, or a browser. It works cross-platform. So it works on an iPhone, an Android, and on all the Microsoft suites like things like Teams and SharePoint. It will work in those environments also. So it gives you an out-of-the-box way, a low-code way to build applications very, very rapidly. So oftentimes you get asked, well, do I need to actually submit my app to the Apple Store, to the Play Store, or whatnot? And you don't. You basically will download the Power Apps app for the iPhone or the workflow app, Microsoft Flow app for the iPhone, for example, and then it gives you access to all your corporate apps and flows at that point. Okay, again, this is a super easy low-code usage, so anybody can build an application. Most of the time, you're going to have to be writing like 1 or 2 lines of code. For some of the apps we've been building recently, a little more elaborate, you'll find yourself actually building code that might be a few pages long in some cases. But all in all, for most of the applications, it'll be very low-code use for this. Okay, so it integrates with about 250 connectors. When I say it, I mean Power Apps and Flow, and then Power BI has its own connectors also for analytics. But for Power BI, as Power Apps and for Flow, they've got a massive amount of connectors out of the box for you. You can also extend those connectors as a developer as well to any of the RESTful connections as well. So there's, if a little bit of development work, you can make your own connector for some of the more elaborate things. Now, unlike before, in October, they released the ability to share these apps outside of your organization as well. So now you can actually build those applications anytime. And to the questions, a few questions in the chat window now. We are recording this webinar, as we always do. It'll be on YouTube later this week, and you can ask questions anytime. Of course, as you can tell right now, I'm answering questions in the Q&A section now. All right, our last slide is this does integrate with things like all these applications integrate together. So as we build a Power App, we can actually use that Power App inside of Power BI. So for example, you might have a Power BI report and you want to go through and actually show how to correct the data. Like maybe you had the wrong forecast number and you want to make small data changes inside the report itself. You can absolutely do that with Power Apps, kind of doing right back to your underlying database. On the opposite side of that, you can put Power BI reports inside of Power Apps. So it becomes your reporting platform for your application. And then likewise, Power Apps can call Flow, and Flow can become a data source for Power BI. So all these things are all interconnected. On top of that, they're all using something called the Common Data Services model behind the scenes. So Common Data Services model gives you the ability, and this is a requirement for AI, by the way, gives you the ability to store certain information. It's basically, I think of it like a data model for a pre-built data model for some of the common entities. So for example, if you were to build an application tomorrow, you're probably going to have to go and stand up an Azure database or stand up an on-prem database, create a schema, then go ahead and connect to that and start building the application on that. Well, every application typically has things like products and users and contacts and those kind of things. These typical tables are all part of the Common Data Services data model. So you can basically connect to that and load it up, and all of your applications, all of your all your Microsoft Flow stuff can all interface with that, and it gives you access to things like row-level security. Now, the reason I'm mentioning Common Data Services so much today is it is a requirement for artificial intelligence that we'll be showing you later today. So you need to have that. It is included in the Power Platform. So everything we're going to be doing today is all part of your base license. The only part of the license that will not work is the Power Apps for Office license. So you need at least a P1 connector with some additional stuff to make this work. All right, let's get into some AI now. Okay, so a question here already about licensing. Do you need a separate set of licenses for Power Apps? So for Power Apps, yes, you can go. There's 3 ways of licensing it. As of October 1st, they changed the licensing structure where they charge you basically per app, per user, per month, or you can have unlimited apps as well. They had up until October 1st a plan called P1 and P2. Those plans still do exist until March. So if you wanted to buy that plan, you can buy that plan and get unlimited apps for like $7, and that you'll be grandfathered in for a very long period at that point. Okay, so and there's also something called Power Apps for Office, which can connect to anything but a premium connector. Okay, so those are a few of the licensing pieces. We covered that quite a bit on a previous webinar, so I hate to go too much into it because the licensing is always interesting to say the least. All right. Also, you can connect on-prem as well. So we had a question here kind of relative to going on-prem. Just like Power BI, you use the same gateway, the on-prem gateway, to connect on-prem data sources and files for Microsoft Flow or for Power Apps. It's all the same stuff, luckily, behind the scenes. So let's get into some AI now. All right, so on the AI side, they've just now in October, well, in October, they're adding a little more meat to the bones, put it that way. They released this a few months ago. What this gives you the ability to do is they've baked in some common scenarios into something called the AI Builder for Microsoft Flow and for Power Apps. Now, Power BI, as you'll see a little bit later, has its own set of goodness as well, which we'll cover a little bit later, and they're adding a whole boatload of items here as well. So the goal is to reduce the overall things you have to do by custom coding or machine learning, reduce that to just a wizard-based, citizen developer-based thing. So it doesn't take a superhero anymore to do it. It can be a citizen developer like a BA doing this. So it's squarely targeted at your analyst and your citizen developer. So let's take a look at some of the use cases for this. Again, I'm focused on this example. This slide is going to be focused on Power Apps and Microsoft Flow. So here's some of the common ones. Now, there is one more that they have, and it's called the business card reader. You can imagine what that does. Of course, it'll take a business card, pull the business card out and strip all the key information out there. So if you want to build an app that where you go into a conference and just take pictures of people's business cards, and you can easily do that today, and that is a quick application you can build today. All right, so let's get into some of these common scenarios here. So up top here, I have the type of AI built in, and on the bottom is the use cases for that. So let's start with the form processor. Now, there's a number of options you have for doing form processing. Well, what I mean by form processing is, let's imagine you have an invoice or a tax form, for example. You can take a picture of that invoice or that expense report or that receipt, and it will pull all the key information out of that and allow you then to reduce your data entry. So let's imagine, for example, you get an invoice in, you pull all the key information out, and then you make some kind of decision based on that. So if I'm fairly confident it's right, I can go ahead and start the data entry with what the AI has read into it. And then I can go ahead and make my corrections if it made mistakes. That's one of the key areas you can do. You can also go through and say, hey, if it's recognized, then maybe if I don't recognize it, I'll go to QA and do additional learning also. So this is the form processing engine. One of the things we'll do a demo on later today. Now this is pretty darn good. Where it has some issues right now, this is the first rev, it just is kind of exiting preview here soon. So where it has issues with will be, imagine an invoice and you got a table in there of all the sub items that were purchased. Well, if you do a table within a table, it gets a little confused and squirrely at that point. So for single table, you can have multiple tables, but they can't be embedded tables. When you do that in your PDF or your JPEG or whatever, it gets a little squirrely and you have to use alternative means. So those alternative means might be Azure Search, for example, and that gives you a lot more flexibility to do with those kind of things as well. Object detection, this is kind of a cool one. This gives you the ability to look at a picture and pull all the key objects out of it after you train it. So a cool example of this that we saw recently was a merchandiser who went to the store, a retail store, and they're trying to see, was their product merchandised correctly at this certain grocery store? So take a picture of the shelf, it would pull, oh, this is a bottle of shampoo, of X shampoo, and it wasn't shampoo in this case, but a certain bottle of soda or whatever. And then it would basically go through and say, I'm 90% certain this is a 2 liter of this type of soda, and I grade this as a 4-star merchandising example, for example. You know, so it's a kind of a neat piece. What we'll be doing in our example later today is we'll be a inventory person. So a box of widgets comes in, I could scan each of those widgets or go through and actually take them out, count them, or I could just go through, take a picture of it, and it will count the objects in there and what type of widget it might be. So for doing things like auto analysis, this is kind of a nice way of doing it. I've got a lot of questions already, don't we, Devin? Is there any ones that are contextual that I should answer now, you think, Devin?
Yeah, I've been addressing some of them as we go. So there was a question again, kind of about dealing with Power Apps in offline scenarios. I'm answering back and forth a little bit about how you can build apps for offline purposes, but they need to at some point, the data needs at some point touch an area where it can connect to the web again to be able to resync the data back into the data source. Yeah, that's a great one.
So we have a customer, for example, that's doing, one customer wanted to do, is doing flights, for example. And they're doing and when a pilot lands, they may be offline. They may be somewhere in the middle of the wilderness. They're fighting fires, for example. And when they land, they may be offline. But the minute they get Wi-Fi signal, it will go ahead and sync those rows up. We have an example of one in the jungle where they're actually delivering water filtration systems. And so that will then sync up all that as well. So Power Apps can definitely do that. Anything else, Devin, we should focus on now?
Oliver asked a question about kind of image quality. So trying to detect the question there is around like a PDF. If the PDF has poor image quality, is the AI reader basically still able to detect it or connect to it? And I guess really it's kind of hard to answer that. It just depends on the quality.
It will try.
Right?
Yeah. It will try. But if somebody's really jacked up the image, it'll mess it up like a human will mess it up also. So it's keep in mind, this is all first rev, and it will try to do things, but sometimes it's not going to be as good as a human can do things. Okay, cool. Anything else, Devin, or should we move on?
You're good to go.
All right, cool. There's a lot of questions. Thank you for answering those in the background. So on the prediction side, this one is cool. This is the determining a VIP customer, for example. So customer walks in, you look them up, you bounce the data up against an engine, and maybe you ask an extra 2 questions because this person has been marked as a credit risk, or maybe you're asking them more questions because they're a VIP customer. You might, show a special offer to them, perhaps. So the prediction model allows you to add questions or take away questions or show different things based on the value of the customer, perhaps, or the risk level of the customer. So it's a binary answer. Is this customer X or Y? Is this customer what's the chance of this customer being a male versus a female? What's the customer being a high value or not a high value, or whatever? So it's a binary yes/no kind of classification. And the last one is text classification. This is where we can look at a massive amount of just text, raw text data, and make a decision based on that, pull tags out of it. So what you're going to do is you're going to teach the model first. You're going to look through and say, all right, I have these comments, these complaints from customers, and let me go ahead and tag this one as a complaint about our training department, or a complaint about our chairs, or whatever. And you go through and you tag them based on what you read personally in there. Then in the future, it's going to try to read that analysis and tag it for you automatically. So you could also tag with, a sentiment of some sort, saying, hey, this text and this is a bad text versus a positive comment, or whatever. So from that, then, when you receive emails, you can bounce it up against this engine with Microsoft Flow, for example, and then route it to the appropriate department based on, is it a customer service issue, or is it something that should be escalated to management at some point? So you can do those kind of analysis inside of Microsoft Flow. So lots of good stuff we can do. And I think that's my last slide. Oh yeah, also on the Power BI side, there's a whole slew of new stuff they're adding on the Power BI side. And Devin, feel free to jump in if there's pieces that you want me to cover here. But at a high level, you can analyze things like, what are the key influencers to somebody doing something, some kind of behavior that you want to analyze. So things like, hey, are they going to college, or are they going to buy your product, or what's the key influencers, something having a fault in the product. So it looks at all the raw data and will make a decision based on that. Likewise, you can also do things like text analytics, where you can pull the keywords out of that. You also have computer vision built in there. I haven't found a good example for that one yet. One of my favorite things is the decision tree logic, where I can kind of say, all right, what are the key elements for somebody buying? And you can kind of navigate down a tree and find out, kind of hierarchical tree to get to the bottom of the tree. Lastly, they're going to be integrating things like Azure Machine Learning into this, so you can bounce things against more sophisticated models where you can turn the knobs, and it's not just a citizen developer idea at that point. It is you have a data scientist that built this very sophisticated model, and you want to bounce Power BI against that also. Devin, anything else you want to add to this?
Yeah, the only things I would add to that, so you mentioned the computer vision example, or the vision section there. One example of that prior to the business card reader being added into Power Apps was a lot of the computer vision capabilities came in through things like reading a business card or reading text off of an image, for example. Some of the other ones that are interesting, the text analytics, things that you could do like sentiment analysis. So as I have incoming data, is it positive, negative, in some way, so you can do things like sentiment analysis in there. And the only other thing that I mentioned now that you didn't touch on is some of these features, specifically the text analytics and computer vision features that are coming to Power BI, are going to be Power BI premium features. So just keep that in mind as far as licensing. Again, not to get to licensing too deep in this webinar, but just something to consider there.
And speaking of questions here, also we had Sean, a good old friend of ours. It was asking about you would absolutely need a license of Azure ML if you wanted to use Azure ML, and it would require at least a pro subscription for that. In some cases, as Devin mentioned a moment ago, it requires a premium subscription of that to get the Mac Daddy stuff.
Yeah, and I think that one particular one, I didn't see that one requiring premium, but the other two, the text analytics and the vision one, did. But Sean's right. Yeah, you would need to have a machine learning model in the back end to be able to do that. And all of these things you'll find, if you want to test them out, play around with them, they're going to be, and the reason why, by the way, why we know about these things that are coming is Microsoft has already talked about them in conferences recently, but you're going to be able to touch and play around with some of these things even within the Power BI desktop and the query editor.
Absolutely. Great question here from Taylor also that I want to kind of answer up top here. Is there a connector for Dynamics CRM? There is absolutely a connector for Dynamics CRM, but not only that for Power Apps and Flow, but the common data services model I mentioned before is the same thing as your CRM database. So it's all sharing the same database. So as you add an account in CRM, that record is now viewable with no effort at all inside the common data services model also. So it's all one unified database now. They're putting a lot of work inside of Dynamics, so you're going to see some really cool stuff. All right. Well, thank you, Devin.
Yeah, as you start to transition, one thing I'll add to answer a question here is someone asked if all the things that were listed there were Power BI available Power BI Pro. I did kind of just lightly mention a couple of those things were premium. Specifically, the ones that are going to be premium were the text analytics and the computer vision ones. All the other ones should be available with Pro. Some of those were, by the way, just new visuals that were made available to you, like the decision tree is a new visual, as well as the key influencers is a new visual as well.
Does not require questions today. I haven't seen this many questions in a long time.
Yeah.
Glad you're riding shotgun with me to answer some of these. All right, well, perfect. So let's go ahead and do some demos now. So we're going to do two. We'll see how much time we have. I'm not going to do the whole demo in some cases. Now, you can get access to these demos also on the Microsoft website. So I wanted to find something that we can do together. So you can play back the tape and kind of watch how to do these yourself also if you want it. All right, so what I'm going to start with here is the form processor engine. So to do that, I'm going to go over to the AI builder, click build, and it's going to ask me a few questions like, what do you want to build today? Now, we'll hope the cloud is behaving today. I'm going to do this form processor. In this case, what I want to do, I'm going to do one called invoice detection. And my goal is I need at least 5 documents that use the same layout to go ahead and classify this. The question I got asked the other day was, well, okay, this is great. I have an invoice one. How about the other vendor is sending me invoices a different way? Then you would have to create another model for that vendor also. So you need for every document type, you'd have to get a new model built for this. You'll notice here, it's going to feel a lot like a business analyst kind of thing. So by the way, if you hit get sample documents, you can go ahead and get the same documents I'm using today also. So I want to create something that you and I could do together here. So I'm going to go add documents, and I'm going to go over to my folder that I got all this goodness from. Go over to my data, and we'll see under, I think it's under, nope, let me go back over here again, under lab and images, excuse me, and one called form processor invoices. Now, in a AI model, there's 2 stages, well, minimum 2 stages. We're going to train the model, and then we're going to test the model. So let's go ahead and train the model. We'll go ahead and add all these PDFs right now. And again, these PDFs have the same kind of format. Looking for my mouse now. There it is. They all have the same format, so they're all uploading right now. These don't just have to be PDFs, they could be other formats also. But go ahead and upload those now. So it's going to upload those. It's then going to try to find key elements out of those. So when I go ahead and close this, let's take a look at what's going to happen now. All right, so I'm going to hit analyze. It will spend a few seconds analyzing all the text inside of here, and we'll see what happens. Now, right now, my computer's busy with my webcam and all this kind of stuff, so it's a little bit slower than it would be normally. But this is where the magic happens, which is really cool. We'll be able to then select once it comes up here, so analyzing. We'll be able to select each of the objects and pull out key information from that. Okay, so while this is doing its thing here, let me go ahead and open up another window here. I'm going to go ahead and create a brand new app here. We'll just call this just webinar, and we'll just create some junky app to kind of play with here today. All right, it's going to be a blank tablet application in Power Apps we can kind of play with today. Now let's see if this is still analyzing. It is done now, thank goodness. Okay, good timing, huh? So I'll select our form here, and here we go. So now it's found key elements here, and it's suggesting what we want to name it. So for example, I've got an invoice number right here. When I click on this, you can see it actually is going to create a new field called invoice. I could actually give it a better name like invoice number if I wanted to, and accept that. Then I have a table of stuff that they want to buy. Notice that it actually says table 0, item, quantity, rate, and amount. So when I click on that, again, I can go ahead and call this just, I can select inside of here and actually give that a better name also. But I'll also go through and click on these. Okay, my from, my bill to, I've got my subtitle down here. And as I click on these, it's creating new fields in the CDS for each of these elements here. And of course, as I showed, you can change the name of them here. The one that's exceptional here is this table 0. So this one field is holding actually 5 fields and 3 rows in my case. So we'll hit done, and then we'll hit next. These are the fields that were created in the CDS, and we'll hit train. Okay, so it's going to take a few moments to train this model, and I'm going to jump ahead and start building an application from this, because I actually have some stuff already built. So we're on the wait to actually see this thing get published. Somewhere up here, you see it actually training right here, invoice detection. So I've got one here called test form that I created a little bit ago, so you have to wait for it. Actually, it looks like it's already done. That was fast. Normally, it's not that fast. Okay, and we can use this now to go ahead and run a quick test to see, hey, does another row work here? So if I do a quick test and I upload another invoice, let's see how it does. Oh, I picked the wrong folder, but I should have picked the other folder here. So I'm going to pick this, and let's see if it actually pulls the information out. I should have picked the testing folder instead of the train folder, but you get the idea. So there we go. We can kind of hover over each element now, and we can see what is it pulling out of each of these areas, and how confident is it of that. So let's go ahead and close this. Let's publish this model. So now we can use it inside of our Power App that we created a little bit ago. Okay. So the question here about from Tom about spaces, I noticed that I didn't put spaces in there. It's an old habit. CDS does allow spaces for display names, but not the actual field names behind the scenes. So it's an old habit, dies hard. You know, I'm a SQL Server DBA at heart, so that's why I have trouble with spaces sometimes and not doing that. So let's go ahead and use our model. So let's go over to my webinar app that I built a little bit ago. And I'm going to build a quick application. We'll go to Insert, and you'll see a new area called AI Builder and this thing called Form Processor. Now, check
Brian,
out
while you're loading that in, one of the questions that's been asked a couple times here, so go ahead and have you do it, is the data source. Do you have to use CDS for AI capabilities?
Unfortunately, the way they're going to get you to adopt CDS is going to force you to adopt CDS. So yes, you do have to use CDS. It's a way of saying, hey, you don't have to buy a database now to store all this information. We already have a database sitting here. You're already paying for the database. So just load it into the database right here instead. Because they've done it that way, it does give you things like row level security and all this stuff, all these little hitchhiker features that come with that. But that was a methodology around choosing that. So this right here, for example, is a CDS entity, and when I select it, we're off to the races. So you'll notice over and over again, everything I do today, except for the business card viewer, is using CDS. Okay. I hope I answered your question for those that were asking that. So yep, let's go ahead and analyze a new form. So I'm going to go over here. I'm going to go to my testing folder here, pull a new form out of here. And with a few things going to happen, it's going to analyze this, and I want to drop in a few key areas here. Let's drop a quick label in here just so we can kind of test this. All right, so you'll notice, if I zoom in a little closer here, you can kind of see it's doing some stuff now. It's all 100%, but it feels very comfortable that it picked the right fields out. So I threw a text field in here. Oop, there we go. And let me kind of zoom out here a little bit. That's a little too much. There we go. So I've had this text field here, and it's called Form Processor 1, is this little image that you're seeing on the left here. All right, so let's go ahead and try to use that. So if I just type in Form Processor 1, what do we see? All right, Form Processor, there we go, 1. Then we can go through and say, dot something. Well, we have the original image before it was all cropped. We could say, give us the, over here, form content. So if I say form content dot, now we can see some of the fields. So fields dot. Now we can see who's the bill to there. What was the date of the invoice? What was the invoice number? So there's my invoice number right here. Let me kind of zoom in a little closer so you can see that. There we go. There's my invoice number that matches up to this guy over here on the right. If we want to go ahead and see other fields, of course, we can see that. Now, what most people are going to do this for is they're going to have these not as text like you're seeing right here, but as a text input. So this is for our data entry clerk, for example. So they scan the invoice, they're going to confirm that everything lines up to the numbers, the picture you're seeing on the left, and if it matches up 100%, they'll hit accept, and then they'll go ahead and insert that data into the database. So this is a way where you can kind of, kind of scan stuff out and simplify your data entry job. Now to see this table, I need to drop in a gallery instead because there's multiple rows there. So I'll drop a gallery in, and I'm not going to do an image here. So I'm going to go ahead and change what the gallery is showing here. So let's go ahead and do a title, subtitle. Good enough. Let's drag it over here. Again, when all else fails, just go to the left here and type in form processor, whatever the object name is you're seeing right here. When all else fails, go over there and type in that. And we know we saw already form content. Now this time it's a gallery. So if I go to tables, remember you saw that table before was called table 0? If I hit dot, oh, there it is, table 0. Oop, oop, oop. Sorry, I lost my, there it is, table 0. Now, as soon as I do that, it's pulling some of the key information out, of course. Now, I could go through and modify this. We're seeing the amount right here. We could do a little space here and do a quantity. I don't have to do this item. I'm going to say quantity, for example, and say units, like that. So now we're starting to see it takes shape now. Again, this will be used, say, you can have a different input boxes and say, this is what we read of the invoice, and do you accept this? Do you accept this, or do you want to make changes to it? You can do all that live at that point before you send it to the database. And you would send it to the database something called a patch command or a submit form command is how you would send it to the database. Okay, so question about, a really important one about CDS here. Is premium required to access the CDS? No, you wouldn't just need a Power Apps license to access it or a Flow license. You would need either the P1 license, so you cannot do it with Power Apps for Office, but you can do it for Power Apps for Plan 1 or just the general Power Apps license. Okay, so great question from Stephanie there. It's an important one. I'll make sure I don't miss. Also, question here, everything that we're doing today with the AI Builder also works inside of Flow. It's a question here from Ensign. And so if I build something here, I could actually upload these invoices into a folder, and Flow could loop through that folder and try to pull all the key elements, whether it be here or whether you want to do something like with Logic Apps and get more fancy there, you can use a different kind of AI there also. So all sorts of cool stuff you can do with AI Builder on that. Okay, so this was our first example. How do we pull key elements out of a form, which we did there. All right, so Devin, anything else I should cover here from my question-wise, or we covered?
No, I think you got them all.
All right, cool. So while I'm here, let me go ahead and get rid of that. Let me show you an easy one you can do today that is not inside of the AI Builder technically, but it's just a neat little thing. It's a business card reader. This is just a quick 2-minute demo I was going to show you. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to upload, I'm going to put an image in here also. Okay. Insert my media image. All right, so I'm going to put an image side by side just so you can kind of see where'd it go. It must be on the top left, I bet. There it is. Okay, so on the left is going to be the clean version of the image. On the right is the messy version of the image. Now this time is called Business Card Reader 1. So I'll just type in that, Business Card Reader 1, and I'll do dot original image, I think it's called. There it is. All right, so as soon as I upload this terrible looking business card, it's going to clean it up, and then we'll see the clean version on the left and the dirty version on the right. So let's go over to our images here. Let's go to business cards, and let's pull this gnarly one right here laying on a table here. So as it does this, it's going to read that business card and hopefully zoom in on it. There we go. Check that out. Isn't that cool? So it pulled from this image right here, pulled this clean version of the business card, and now I can go through just like you saw before. I can go through and pull all the key elements out of this. So again, if I type in business card reader, there it is, dot, and we can find out, all right, what is the address? What is the business phone, for example? So there we go. We're seeing the 123, the business phone next to that. Let me kind of zoom in so you guys can see the full glory of it here. So as you see, it's pulling out the phone number right here, that 555 number is coming down here. So again, as you're going through this, you can get a conference scanning these business cards and then changing whatever information it may have missed and then going through. So in your case, you have a picture of a hand with the business card laying on the hand as you took pictures of it. So really easy example that you can do today if you want your sales team to be a little more efficient on this kind of stuff. Okay. All right. That is a business card reader. So let's jump to our next AI feature, and that is going to be over here under it's going to be the object detector. So I'm going to go over to AI Builder again. I'm going to go to Build, and I'm going to kind of short fuse this a little bit here so we can kind of see how it works. I'm going to do object detection, and we'll just call this blah, 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 because I'm not actually going to finish at the model here. So this one's a little more elaborate as far as what's required to do this. And so I'm going to go ahead and select object name. I'm going to pick a CDS entity of all my products. So I've got one here called objects, but this is basically a list of products. There's my product names right here. So when I say select field, we're going to see there's my product names right here. Green tea, cinnamon, and tea mint here. I'll hit next. Next, I need to upload some images. And then we're going to manually classify these. So there's a big retailer that we were doing some work for that wanted to use this to figure out what was from a catalog, for example. So let's go ahead and go to Object and go to Train. I'll then select all these images, and don't worry, I'm not going to go through and actually do all this work here. All right, there we go. I'm going to upload those. I'll spend a few seconds here uploading it. Now, a few rules around this. You want the image to be in its natural surrounding. So if it's on a shelf, you want it to be on a shelf. You want it to be, these are all staged. So if you see yourself as a catalog company and you're going to stage these images always, then you want to make sure you stage them like you're seeing right here. You don't want to have it in a light box all by itself, for example. You want it to be in its natural surrounding. You also want to get about 15 examples per image, so per product that you're trying to classify. 15 is the minimum. So you'll see I had some problems because I only chose 15. So it gets better and better the more you classify it. So when I hit next here, it's going to ask me to start tagging these images. So let's pick this guy right here, for example. So I can draw a box around it, Contoso Tea Mint, for example. I'll then check the product, it's the Tea Mint. I can also just hit the hand right here, and it's going to see, okay, I found an object, but it did a bad job that time. Oh, there we go. It found the object, it has it highlighted, and then goes cinnamon. It's going to get better and better at classifying these as I do this. So now it has rows, and hit next, and do the next product. So far I've done one product of each. Again, I'll go through, select this right here, pick my rows, and so on and so on. So I would do that times about 30 images here. I'm not going to make you guys watch me do 30 images. But essentially, after I'm done, I would hit done tagging, and essentially, I'm done. I then go ahead and deploy that model. So I publish the model, excuse me, that other things can then use with it. So let's go back real quick and see inside my application how I use this. So go to AI Builder, go to my object detection, excuse me. This time, I have an object detection model right here called Webinar. All right, looks very, very similar to what you saw before with the business card reader. This time, I'm going to go ahead and hit detect. I'll point to a object here. How about we point to, I'll make sure I'm in my training folder, or my testing folder, excuse me. And I'll point this guy as Contoso Tea here, for example. Okay, so I want my model to be able to go and find out what is inside this picture. And you can see it already found it, Tea Mint here, already found the object here. So if I were to drop a gallery in this time, what we want to do is we want to basically have an automated system for doing inventory. So we'll take a picture of the product, and then I'll go ahead and do a title, subtitle, and we put our form inside the gallery. So this time, let's be calling this one object detector, object detector, dot, and we'll see, okay, so vision objects, what did it find? And there we go. It found these type of things that are in its library. So let's go ahead and hit the pencil icon and go in this one thing, and let's see how many, what's the count of how many things it actually found in there. Okay, so as you're seeing, it found a had found one green tea mint. And you can, of course, put things like filters on this where it only shows the items it actually sees. So I can go through and filter this down to just the stuff it actually saw. So I can say, give me a count where it's greater than 0. And by doing that, I'm only going to see the objects that are in the library. So let me zoom in a little closer so you can see this. So now we're seeing the Contoso Green Tea Mint, and it found one of those bottles inside the mint area. Okay, so it's kind of a neat thing you can do to kind of do object detection. Again, this can be done automatically also. You can go through and upload into a folder and have it try to classify stuff and put it into subfolders automatically also using something like Microsoft Flow. All right, I want to leave time for Devin here. I just want to show one last thing here, and this is before I pass it over to Devin here. And let me go ahead and cancel this guy here. Don't use that image. Let me go ahead and back to my core site here. The last thing I was going to show is text qualification, and I went the wrong site. Okay. Now, a text qualification, this is where it's going to look the text of the image and try to find what's going on inside, inside the text, excuse me, not image. So let's go to build this. And this time, I'm going to go ahead and I've already uploaded my text. So to save a little time here, so I'll just call this blah, 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 because I'm not going to finish it. Again, this time you want to go through and try to get at least 10 or 15 examples from each type of tag that you want. So let's go ahead and select some text, and I've got some complaints I have in here. So I think I have something called healthcare comments. There it is. And these are comments, and where's my text at? My text is in the comment field. Hit select field. Now I loaded this with something called Power Query. You'll see it inside of Power Apps. You'll see it right here under Data. And it's called data flows, and I open up Power Query to actually load this data. Once I've done that, let me hit next. You'll see all the good stuff here, all the comments. Now it's going to, well, where are your tags at? Well, I have my tags inside this thing called tag, and I have a comma separated list of tags of staff, faculty, check-in process, and so on. Next, it's going to go through, and when I hit next, it's going to go through and ask me my language. So it does work multilingual. And hit train. So it's going to go through now and try to pull the key text out and make it where I can now use this model for routing things like support tickets and all that. So I actually have one right here already built. It takes about 2 or 3 minutes to do this, and I'm going to go ahead and do a quick test to see how it looks. So of course, I don't have a lot of docs I use for this. Ideally, I would have hundreds of them to kind of test this. So this could also be things like for Twitter analysis and all that. But if I go in here and say, my check-in in process was terrible, I can then hit test. And hopefully now we'll see some kind of process. Oh, in this case, we don't have the check-in. I think I misspelled check-in. There we go. But anyways, let's say the nurse yelled at me for an hour about the hospital policy, something like that. All right, when I hit test now, we should hopefully see at least a tag about the staff member. What was the deal? Oh, I must not publish this. Let's see. I'm not sure why. Hopefully I picked the right one here. Let's see. Yeah, it's working this time at 85% sure that it has the word staff. And now it's not just the fact that it has the word staff. If I go and say the doctor was terrible, something like that, it should hopefully now recognize that that was a staff member also. It's weird. So I don't have enough data here, it looks like. So I would go through and teach it more, but this is the kind of stuff you can do with it though. So you can say the hospital didn't feel clean. And hopefully now it'll say faculty, facility, excuse me. So we'll see. There we go. So we can see it's fast facility in this case. So it recognizes the word hospital there is pulling out that something, or the word clean was something wrong with the facility in this case. So again, I don't have a whole lot of data to test it with, not test with it, but to train this model with. So ideally you would have another 100 or so rows to kind of really teach the model, and you have some kind of analyst going through and teaching it how to fish, teaching the model how to fish. All right, so Devin, are you ready, sir? Do you have any questions that we want to cover before we switch over to Power BI?
Maybe just one relevant one here. Someone asked what happened, and I think this is back to your images example. What happens when you have two texts on an object? How does it detect which one to choose? And I guess that kind of goes more to the number of examples you provided. It's able to detect it a little better, huh?
Yeah, so if I go through here, and for example, in this case, and I pick this guy with 3 images. Now, the reason I didn't do that in my case is because I had a flaw in my model when I built this. I didn't do enough rows, but you're seeing it found green tea rose, 2 of those, and green tea mint here it also picked. Now I had a flaw in the model where it's picking both the cinnamon as rows, and that's because I picked a few. I was going through really quickly before this demo, and I picked a few more cinnamons that I should have here, a few more cinnamons as roses. So I screwed up, not the model in this case.
Gotcha. Okay, yeah, I'll go ahead and flip over to myself.
All right. And then I will turn my webcam on.
Let me know you can see my screen.
You're good.
All right, perfect. So on my end, we're going to be showing the Power BI aspects of this. And for those of you on the line here that have played around with Flow, I saw a few folks mention, the correlations between some of the things that Brian was showing and what they could have done in Flow in the past. Microsoft Flow has actually had a lot of integration into things like Azure Cognitive Services in the past. So some of these things that are now available in Power Apps, you could already do in Flow before. So they've just now made it where it's one less step. You don't have to go now create a separate flow. You can do it all within inside of Power Apps by itself. So there's a lot of fun integrations. If you haven't played around with Flow yet, I certainly recommend it. But for the last demo here that we're going to show as we wrap up is the AI capabilities within inside of Power BI. We had a slide earlier where we talked about a few of these components. Some of them are coming soon, and they've already been talked about at different conferences and things like that, so you may have heard of these, but they're not, many of them aren't officially out yet. Now, the thing that is out that I want to show you that's been out since about February of this year, but they've been constantly tweaking and taking and making more enhancements to it, is the key influencer visual. So I have a data set I've already brought in here because I thought we might have limited time, as we do. And I'm going to bring in the key influencer visual, which you see right here, to kind of do a quick little demonstration of how you could use it. And the purpose of this visual is to be able to determine what are some of the key influencers in fill in the blank. So are you trying to determine what are the key influencers to having increased sales, or what were the key influencers to someone being a return shopper, whatever it may be? You can use this visual to try and determine what are some of those influential metrics or attributes that go into someone being a return customer, for example. So for this example, I'm going to bring in some kind of fun data. We're going to be looking at shark attack data, and I want to be able to determine what goes in. Yeah, not fun for the persons that were involved, I suppose. But I want to look into what are the components or what are the attributes that are influential towards a fatal shark attack. So I guess you could say it's not very fun. So I'm going to bring in the fatal field into my analyze part of this visual, and then it's expecting me to now pass in other attributes to determine what are the key influencers to something being a fatal shark attack. Now, right now, you can see up in the top right, it's looking actually at whether or not it's a yes or no column inside my data source, the fatal column here. And so I want to see what influences a yes fatal shark attack here. So I can bring in certain types of fields here if I wanted to. So I can do something like maybe bring in the type of event it was. So I can check off the type column here, and you can see it starts to bring in some influential capabilities of this data set. I could also bring in things like maybe what activity was going on whenever the shark attack occurred, maybe what species of shark it was, and maybe the sex of the shark here as well. So I've got a few things in here, and you can see let me go ahead and full screen this so you guys can get a better view of it. But what this is showing me here is what attributes go into a shark attack being fatal. And you can see that the type of event it is the most influential field here. So you can see here that if it's a sea disaster, that's the most influential type of event that could cause a shark attack. Surprisingly, an unprovoked event, meaning that you didn't go poke the shark or something like that, if you didn't provoke the shark, that's still a potentially fatal event here. So you don't necessarily have to go out of your way to provoke the shark to actually make it more aggressive towards you. And probably not surprisingly to most of us here, men are more likely to have shark attacks that are more on the fatal side, unfortunately. So that we're putting ourselves in more precarious situations, I suppose. But you can see here, it looks like it, one person, by the way, Stephanie, noted here that invalid showed up in my graph on the right-hand side. Let's take a look at that. Invalid is actually a value in my different types of events that can occur. Basically, it means that there wasn't a valid entry for the type of event that was occurring whenever the shark attack happened. But it looks like the most influential are C disaster, invalid, meaning that there just was no, that could basically be a null here. There was nothing valid entered. And then from this visual, you can dig a little deeper and you can say, well, just show me the ones that are just the ones that are positive influencers towards this event. And so it looks like the C disaster and unprovoked are the most influential here. And the average, excluding the ones that are selected here, is 22.2%. 22.2%. So what you should look at when you see this, when you see that the C disaster is about 3 times more likely to lead to a fatal shark attack, that's actually looking at the percentage that you see here. So you can see that the shark attack fatal is 71%. And it's looking at that by the average. So 3 times the average would get us roughly where our C disaster is for the 71.7%. So that's kind of how it came up with the numbers that you see here. You could, of course, flip the script here. You could say, well, I'd like to see what led to a non-fatal shark attack. So what do you have to do to make a non-fatal one? Apparently, provoking the shark actually does not necessarily make it a fatal incident. So provoking it doesn't influence it in a positive way. Having a boating event or being on a boat or a boating event don't impact it. And then female does not influence in a positive way a shark attack either.
I'm confused on that Sharknadoes in this.
Yeah, I know. There's no. There should definitely be Sharknado in here. You can also look at some of the top segments as well. So this actually does some segmenting of your data, so kind of some grouping of your data as well. And if you look at our largest segment here, or some of our largest segments, you can look more. Well, actually, here's our larger segment. You can look at what actually grouped those values together. So it's grouping values based on similarities they may have together. So it looks like the sex being not female, the type of not provoked, and the really somehow those two got planted in here together. They grouped them together, led to this segment here where we can look at, and you could even get more detail about the segment itself. So if you want to learn more about this segment, scroll down a little bit more. By the way, you might find this a little unusual where the type of provoked and the type of unprovoked would end up in the same segment here. The way that ends up being is that the type field has a lot of things other than just provoked and unprovoked. So those two happen to get grouped together, but underneath the type field, we also had sea disasters and boating and things like that. But you can dig deeper into each one of these segments and actually see, well, looks like 50.1% of the records are white sharks and 7.2% of the records are kind of undistributed here. So there's some interesting ways you can dig deeper and deeper into the data and see fishing was 19% here, kayaking was 4%, and you can kind of dig deeper and deeper and find out, again, what are some of the more influential things that go into, in this case, a shark attack, but it could be really any other field that you want. When this visual was first released, you could actually not do the field that you would prepare your analysis on, where it says analyze right here previously, that could only be a text field. That's since changed. You can actually bring in measures in here now as well, which you couldn't previously. So you can kind of really, over time, over the last year, they've really been enhancing what this particular visual can do. And this visual is available to you now, but you're also going to be coming out very soon, which again, Microsoft has mentioned at various conferences, that you're going to see things like a decision tree visual that allows you to be able to see what led to someone making a decision to buy from you, for instance. You can kind of drill down and get deeper and deeper into what led to that decision. That's a visual that's going to be coming that they've already shown many times at different conferences. And then in addition to that, we mentioned a few things that are inside of the Power Query Editor that will be coming. Inside the Power Query Editor, there's going to be some AI transforms that are going to be made available to you. And where you'll find them is whenever you click on the Edit Queries button, inside of your query editor, you'll then find a new section that's going to appear soon that's going to allow you to look at things like computer vision to try and detect things from images. You'll also be able to do things like tap into your Azure ML models that you've created and actually bring that in. You'll also be able to do things like text analysis. So if you want to do some like sentiment analysis on incoming data and determine, like Brian was showing earlier, where maybe you have the word like my nurse was terrible, something like that, it could actually detect from the word terrible, was that a positive or negative word that's being extracted from your data source. So some of those things are coming soon. Some of those features will be Power BI Premium only features, so keep that in mind as well. But there's a lot of great things that are coming. They're putting a lot of big investments on the AI side here now, and there's also some big investments on the data flow side with AI that are just now being officially released. But I think that's
I now see why you want to go on a fishing trip this weekend then.
Yeah, exactly.
So real quick question, the key influencer visual on Power BI, where are you going to find that again? It's already installed, right? It's already, if you went down the latest version, you're gonna be copacetic?
Yeah, so it is part of the latest version of the Power BI desktop. Let me just verify and see. Is it still in preview? I think it might still be a preview feature that needs to be turned on. I'll just double check that real quickly. Actually, it is out of preview, so you can download. It's GA now. You can actually go just from the regular Power BI desktop. You'll see it in the visualization section in the visualization pane, and you can add it and start to use it now.
Awesome. Yeah, this is part of our we have a lot of classes around Power BI and Power Apps and Flow, but we also have this one thing that's pretty cool now that Devin's group is doing. It's called hackathons, and it's like 1 day of training where we spend a day on building Power Apps for training or Power BI or Flow, and then there are 2 to 4 days we're actually around building prototypes so you're actually trying it with your own data. If you're interested in that in your own company, you'll see a survey question at the end to kind of clarify that. It looks like, Devin, we have a few questions here. Will the key influencer be available also on the Power BI report server?
Good question. I do not believe it is available in the release I have on my machine. So I'm looking at the May release right now, but there was a September release that came out recently. I would have to double check to verify whether it's in the latest release there, but I do not believe it is.
Yeah, I don't think it is either at this point, at least. All right, well, very, very good. Looks like we're down. We've answered most of the questions now, but if we missed your question or if you're interested in these hackathons, you'll see my my email address as bknight@Pragmatic Works. Devin is D, like Devin, Knight @Pragmatic Works also, in case you want to get a hold of Devin. But feel free to reach out to us and love to, if we missed your question or if you have any other questions when you're watching the recording of this, let us know. But thank you so much for attending this webinar. It looks like, Crystal, I'll hand it back to you since we're down to at noon now. Have a great lunch, guys. Goodbye.
All right. Thanks so much, Brian. We really appreciate it. And like Brian stated before, we will have the recording available tomorrow in your inbox. But if you want to view any of our old webinars, you can visit our YouTube page at Pragmatic Works, or you can visit our website under resources and go to free training. You will see all of our archived webinars. Thank you guys so much for joining. If you guys have any questions or think of anything that you guys want to ask after the webinar, please feel free to email myself, Devin, or Brian. We'll be happy to help you guys. Thanks so much and have a wonderful rest of your day. Bye-bye.